Okay, this episode is going to be about flashlights. There's thousands of different types out there. I'm just going to show you what I'm using while I'm camping. And just to start this off, what I would recommend, I mean, none of these companies are paying me to do this. Now, you always want to have a real powerful flashlight. And I'm using a Stanley. You can see it's a nice big heavy duty flashlight. They're the tool company, Stanley, puts these out. They're not cheap, but man, this thing, I think it's like a million candle power. So I can shine this at night and spotlight something 100 yards away with this heavy duty Stanley. I've been using that 5 or 6 years. And the other nice thing, you know, like I say, if you're boondock camping, this charges the NiCad pack inside using just a standard cigarette lighter connector. You know, and it has a little micro USB port that goes in here, and then you just push it into a cigarette lighter, either in your vehicle or I have a cigarette lighter socket inside my RV, and I also put one on the outside here too, outside of the trailer, 12 volt. Which I'm hooking up my antenna to it. That's a standard 12 volt socket I put on the outside, and I waterproofed it, and there is a little cap that you can put on there too, so no water can get in there. But I also put it in this housing and caulked everything. But that I'm using that for my antenna. My satellite antenna. Anyway, so you always want a super powerful. Then you can always go with the small mag light with the little clip. This one has a clip for, you know, clipping onto your pants, whatever. This one I wouldn't recommend, by Cree. Harbor Freight puts them out, and the reason why is after you've used it for a couple hours and you go to charge the batteries, they come with these unusual size 3.7 volt NiCads. And to give you an idea, compared to your standard NiCads, AA's and AAA's and stuff, so none of the chargers in the US will charge these batteries. So you get a couple hours out of this thing, this little mag light, and then it's useless. You have to throw it out because there's no way to charge the batteries. You can't put these type, you know, the regular AA's or AAA's inside there. They require these big, you know, NiCads. So anyway, you want a good set of NiCad batteries, 9 volts, whatever you're using that requires batteries. You want to go to NiCad rechargeables. You don't want to have to buy batteries. I never buy batteries. Okay, and I've got 2 charger units. This one, which will do 9 volt, and it'll do your AA, AAA, C's and D's. Does 4 at a time, requires 120 volt AC. But if you have an inverter and you're out in the boondocks, you could just plug it into your inverter and it'll work. But I prefer is this one. This works off of solar. It's 5 by 6 inch solar panel on here. Okay, and so you don't have to hook it up to 120 volt AC. You know, basically the sun will charge this thing. Okay, and it's telling you how long it takes. It's not focusing. Sometimes, there it goes. How long it takes, you know, in the sun for it to charge the different types of batteries. And your 9 volts are actually 200 milliamps, not 20, as it says on here. That's a fifth of an amp. Your C's and D's, 2500 milliamps, that's 2.5 amps. Your C and D batteries will hold 2.5 amps. AA is 2 amps, and AAA is 0.9 amps, almost 1 amp. It gives you your charging time. But in the back here is where you put your batteries in. Here's your 9 volt, and this is where you put in your C's and D's and AA, AAA batteries. And it's all working off of solar. So it's got a little handle there, and So that's really nice to have. I mean, that's true boondock, and you know, using the solar, you know, the sun. Okay, and you also want a headlamp because it frees up both of your hands, especially if you're doing some type of work outside at night. Have yourself a headlamp, and then they look kind of like Star Trek phasers. I've had these like 6 years now, and I still have not had to put a battery in them. You can see they got solar panels on the side here, or solar cells, and quite a bit, considering the size. And that's the on-off button, and that works on LED. And it's not super bright, but it's totally been charging for 6 years now. The internal batteries, there's not even a battery compartment, and it's still lasting after all these years. It's just running off of the solar. Now the other neat thing about these is you'll see it's got this is a crank. Okay, so it's got a generator inside. So when you hand crank this thing, let's just say it's nighttime and you run out, you know, the batteries go dead, you crank this for 60 seconds, the generator inside will charge the NiCad pack. And that 60 seconds of cranking, I average about 10 more minutes of light. So that's a great feature to have a hand crank flashlight. You never, literally, it doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the night or not, you don't have to rely on replacing batteries. You don't have to, all you have to do is hand crank it. And like I said, I've been using these for 6 years now. I got 2 of them. And I gave one to my neighbor, and he liked it so much, and he's still using his. Okay, what else do I want to talk about? Okay, you also want to have a voltmeter, a cheap one, like Harbor Freight sometimes even gives these away. And you want to be able to check your battery voltages. A lot of times something's not working. Instead of throwing out the battery and put a new one in, just check it real quick. A lot of times the battery's okay, and it's just something like a bad switch or a bad light bulb or something. So you want your voltmeter, and these look complicated because they can do a lot of things, but normally you're only going to be using the voltage section of it, DC volts. And even on the 200 volt setting, I'll show you some other handy things you can do with this one. And I believe I got this for free at Harbor Freight. It was like a freebie. If you want to check your solar panels, I had 2 bad panels recently. These are Harbor Freight, and they're 25 watts each. But when you put them in series, you get 100 watts out of it. So anyway, you can quickly check using your meter if these panels, most 100 watt system should be putting out over 20 volts. So I've got this set on 200 because if I set it on 20, it's going to auto range and just show a 0. So you go to your connectors. I disconnected one of them here. I'll just try to get this. I'm doing it with one hand. It's a little complicated. Okay, it's showing 19.5 volts because the panels are partly in the shade right now. But anyway, that will, if you start seeing 8-10 volts, you know, something way below 20 volts, it means the panel's bad. So you can do a quick panel check this way. Simple test. Put it on volts and just put in your 2 leads. Okay. Another quick thing, other than battery checking and checking your solar panels, you can check your alternator on your vehicle. My vehicle's running right now, so as long as your vehicle's running, when you go to your battery, you're actually checking not the battery voltage, you're checking your alternator voltage. So put one lead here, another lead there. It's showing 13.3 to 13.7, 13.9. That's what the alternator's producing. I personally like to see over 14 volts, 14.5 volts from an alternator. But as long as it's above 12.7 volts, it's going to be charging your battery. So, and I'll just turn it off, the engine off, and then you read the actual battery voltage to see if your battery's good. So you can do two quick checks there for your alternator. Alternator check and your battery check. 12 volt battery check on your vehicle. So these multimeters just come in handy for everything. You know, I mean, you really have to have one. Okay, so that's your actual battery voltage. 12.5, which is okay, but 12.7 would be full charge. Okay, simple test. And it doesn't matter if you cross the leads on these multimeters. They're digital. See the minus sign? That means I've crossed the leads. The positive, actually, the red one should be over here. It doesn't matter. You can't ruin. Now the minus sign's gone. That means it's hooked up correctly. It shows you polarity. Like I say, it won't hurt your meter if you hook it up wrong. Okay. So get one of these. You know, less than 10 bucks. A cheap one will work. It's got a lot of uses. There's a lot of other functions on there which I won't get into. You could do continuity check, resistance check. This one also does NPN and PNP transistors. It does a diode check, gain check of a transistor. It does AC amps, DC amps, AC volts, DC volts, all that stuff. But typically, just using the DC voltage setting, and you probably will never have to even move that dial. You put it on the 200 and you're just using it for voltage. So anyway, hopefully there was a few pointers there, a few tips, different types of flashlights I'm using. Like I say, I'm really impressed with the power of this Stanley. Like I say, I've been using it quite a few years, never had to open it. There's no battery compartment. 5-6 years now. I can look up that pasture 100 yards, 200 yards away and illuminate something with this thing. It's super powerful. And even these little guys here, I just like the whole idea that they're being charged by solar, by sun, and you can also crank them up to get more power out of them just by turning your dial, you know, your hand crank here. So now I got these on eBay, believe it or not, $7. They were selling, you know, 5-6 years ago, $7 each. So I got 3 of them, and then my neighbor fell in love with one of them. He went up. He's still using his. But anyway, Siegel Eric, signing off.